Hey guys, it's Tiffany Dean Cosplay here, just with a quick introduction to today's video. So today is a time lapse of the Alex Strasser cosplay that I made based on the design by Zach Fisher illustration for Jessica Negri. I won't go into too much now because you guys will hear me talking over the video with the voiceover. As always, if you've got any questions, feel free to shoot me a comment below and I'll answer them as best as I can. Alternatively, feel free to follow me on the social medias. Everything is linked below in the comments. And yeah, hopefully you guys like it. Thanks! Okay, so the first part of this time lapse is how I make breastplates for armor. This is how I make nearly all of my breastplates, apart from ones like Nova where it's a totally different style. As you can see, I've used a bra to trace around. This gives me a really good idea of where the boobs need to be and then where to draw the pattern underneath. I do this freehand. You could totally do like a line art version and print it and trace it and flip it. This is what works for me. Yeah, if you're not comfortable doing it freehand, do not feel that you need to. This is just like a rough guide. And there will be a bit of trial and error. Don't be afraid to squiggle quite a bit. Just maybe use a different colored Sharpie or a pen. And then the first thing I do once I've drawn one half is I cut it out, because I will then fold it over to get the other side to be relatively symmetrical to my first side. And you will see the bit that I traced around the bra, I did draw a line about 1 centimeter or so above that, because I actually glue this onto a bra directly, which you'll see soon. So here I'm just tracing around the other side. You will need to touch up a little bit. It's probably not going to be clear, and as you're tracing around it's going to be thicker, so bear that in mind. You probably need to cut inwards. So the next stage is, because I do use a bra as a base for all of my armor pieces, I do cover the boobies with Warbler or any kind of thermoplastic. You don't have to do this. You could put a covering over your bras and then just heat the Warbler over them, let it cool off and harden, and pull it off. You will then have booby cups without having to sacrifice the use of a bra. I personally just keep the bra because you've got everything on and fastened. You know it's going to fit, you know it's going to stay on, even if your armor straps could potentially give way. I do buy cheap bras from just stores like Kmart, Big W, Target. So I'm not too sure what the equivalents would be overseas, but just mainstream stores with discount type codes. Here I'm just cutting off the excess, and then I do fold over the Warbler a little bit. If you're opting to not keep the bra, you could just trace around with a Sharpie, pull it off and cut out the bra cup shape that you need. And you could do this with foam as well. Like, you can have foam, BB cups, whatever you prefer working with. And here I am gluing the foam breastplate piece to the bra. I always use contact cement for this. You won't really catch me using hot glue. I like contact cement because it sticks and it generally does not come apart. Just please make sure, as always, you're in a well ventilated area and you are wearing the right PPE when using this, because it's toxic stuff and it stinks. Something shocking. It's a cement contact, so you've got to put it on each side and let it set for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, just so it's kind of dry to touch, and then you can press the pieces together, which is what I'm doing here. I do one side at a time. Yeah, you've got to be careful doing this, because if you don't get it right, it's stuck down and you can't really pull it off. It will rip the foam, not detach. Now here I am covering the boobs with a very thin sheet of foam. I don't normally do this. Normally I put my detail straight over the top of the booby cups, but as I'm needing to carve out scales with a wood burning tool, I need the extra layer so I'm not burning through the warbler and potentially damaging the bra underneath. So yeah, obviously you don't have to do this step, you totally can if you want. You can add details straight away on top. Just for this particular build, this is what I've chosen to do, and you'll see why soon. Again, contact cement to get it on there. I have this thing, I do not like costumes breaking, so I will use contact cement for most things. Just trimming off the excess here, much like I did with the warbler, and folding over the edges. I wasn't too worried about the seam line where it attaches to the darker EVA foam, purely because there's going to be details on there, you're not going to see that ratty looking edge. So here you can see that I've drawn on all the areas that I will be needing the details. I've just used like a pen or a Sharpie. The right booby cup I've already carved out, so you can now see why I've got the foam on there, and this is just the wood burning tool that I'm using to carve out the scales. You kind of can't see it because it's so dark right now. This is just a really cheap wood burning tool from my local Bunnings, so for those overseas it would just be a local hardware store. I think this was only about $10 or $20, and it came with a heap of attachments as well. And again, have ventilation because the fumes from the burning foam will not be good for you, so just make sure, yeah, you get the right PPE and ventilation going on. You only need to go with a very light touch as well, as it burns through very quick and very deep. I think the foam I used on the boobs was only about 1 millimeter thick, so it's very thin foam. Now the fun part, dremeling. It's the bane of many cosplayers' existences. It is so messy, as you can see right here, but it's probably the best way. I don't have a bevel cutter, and my cutting blades are never quite sharp enough to get those really clean cuts on an angle through such dense EVA foam. So I've got the exciting time of dremeling, and I had to do this for so many pieces on this costume, so I'm not going to obviously show you all of it because that would be mind-numbingly boring. So here you can just see how I'm dremeling. It's just the stock standard sander bit that I'm using. You can get them in different levels of grit and coarseness. I would recommend having probably a coarse one to begin with, and then if you could be bothered, which I couldn't. And that is Bazinga, who I did not know was there until after I saw the video, so just keep an eye out for her in the video. But moving back onto the Dremel, and there she's again in the background. Yeah, if you go to a finer bit, you'll have a smoother shape. Butt wiggle. That's a really normal occurrence for Bazinga. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, if you have a smoother drill bit, the sanding disc, it will be smoother, and then when it comes to priming, you're going to have a much, much easier time. Sorry for the footage here, guys. I am still working on a mobile phone. Hopefully one day I can get a decent camera and do all this properly. You can wear like gloves of some kind, like latex or latex free gloves if you want. I sometimes do, but I just wanted to get this done and I could not be bothered wearing some. So those details that I was just painstakingly dremeling, I'm now contact cementing to the breastplate. This glue I have since started putting in little like sauce containers, much like Kamui Cosplay did, and it makes a world of difference. It smells less and it is so much less messy. So really squidge it down when you glue it on, just to make sure you get the full contact of every edge. And you can see already that the breastplate really starts to take form when you start putting details on. They look really quite fugly initially. So the next stage is foam clay. I purchased this from Lumen's workshop when they were down at a convention here in Adelaide. I believe overseas sometimes it's called foam clay. It can be called magic clay, magic Play-Doh. There's a few different things it can be called. So I do know that this is available kind of worldwide now. So for those that want it should be pretty easy to get hold of. And you pretty much use this much like you would just a really lightweight clay. I use my fingers for it. I haven't used tools for it yet, but I think fingers are working completely fine. And you just keep going over it as much as you need to until it is the texture that you want. One thing to bear in mind, it does kind of puff out a little bit. So if you want a really sharp edge, you might just have to keep picking at it as it's drying. And I found it does tend to shrink as well when it dries. So give it a good solid amount of time before you paint it, because then you can get some wrinkles in it, which aren't the prettiest. So there you can see the amazing artwork by Zack Fisher that this costume is based on. With the foam clay, I work with it in bits. I find if you use too much, it can dry out fairly quick and it loses its stickiness. To get it to be sticky again, which I unfortunately had not figured out by the time I was making this video, I only figured it out recently, just wet your fingers a little bit and it will start to stick much better again to what you are putting it on. I'm clearly using my nails here, so oh yeah, Bazinga. You can use tools instead of nails. So here I did have a video of making the braces, but unfortunately when I was putting videos over onto my computer from my phone, I lost a few. But here I've just put packing tape, like clear packing tape, and I'm drawing the pattern. I'll then stick that down on paper once I cut it off, cut it out, and then I have a pattern template. When doing this, make sure you use a permanent marker so it won't rub off on the tape. Hold it in place. You probably could pin it or tape it down to make it easier. I wasn't having a great time trying to do this, but at least this way you get the same pattern on each side, because with these braces I did them symmetrical either side. Or my fellow dragon crafters will feel the pain. It's horrible, it really is. It takes so long. But anyway, I'm using hobby foam, insulation foam. It's again from my local hardware store. I'm using, I think it looks like the 3 centimeter or 30 mil sheets. So I just cut them out, and then to get the bigger horns, I glue 2 or 3 layers together. So here I'm just carving out the basic shape. I do find chipping away at it bit by bit is easier than trying to carve out like a massive portion at one go. And this gets messy as well, and the little bits of excess foam that you're carving get really staticky, so just bear in mind you're going to have a hard time with it just sticking to your hands. It's something chronic. And this stuff is super flimsy and fragile as well, so just be super careful when you're cutting it. Obviously not to cut yourself, so be very mindful and aware of that. And yeah, if you cut it wrong or you pull too hard on your blade, you could snap the pointy bits of your horns off, which you don't want. Please stay safe when you're doing this, guys. I've cut myself many times and it's really not fun. If you're young or if you don't feel comfortable doing it, just have somebody help you out, and yeah, just chip away bit by bit. It's a bit less traumatizing and dangerous that way. And keep your blades sharp. If you have a blunt blade doing this, it's going to be torturous. Sharper blade will go through the foam much, much easier. One of the rare times that I do use hot glue and rip to that glue gun. As you can see, I did not use it properly at all. Do not use it like that. Please do not put hot glue guns on the side. They blow up and it is terrifying. But here I'm just using that just to whack my horns together. It doesn't have to be neat because they're going to be carved out, and I'll be covering them with thermoplastic. So yeah, it doesn't matter if the seams are not perfect. And just a heads up, if you guys use cement glue or contact glue, it will eat this foam and it will disappear, so please do not use that on this foam. And as you can see, I've drawn the shape on the base, so it just gives me a rough guide as to where I'll be carving. Again, this takes quite some time. Just be patient with it. If you get sick of it, move on to something else, come back to it. I just did it all in one go because I hated it that much. I wanted to get it over and done with nice and quickly. And be super careful at the ends because, as I said before, this stuff is so flimsy and fragile. The amount of times I've nicked off the top and think, okay, I just have to fix it with Warbler and wish it into a point at the top. So it happens to everybody. So don't stress if it happens, you can fix it. Foam clay, Warbler, thermoplastics, EVA foam, everything's fixable. And again, with the carving out, just chip away at it bit by bit, take your time. Kind of looks like those candy bananas that we used to get as a kid. So as you can see, it takes a while, and this is sped up by, you know, like a few 100%. I always do sand mine after I let them smooth because I just find for a base for the thermoplastic to go over, it's just better if it is smoother. Obviously, if you're going to be covering it in foam or paper mache or anything, you probably don't have to do this. This purely is just for neatness for me. And again, you can leave these horns uncovered. I would not recommend it, because if you're at a convention and somebody walks into you, the chances of it breaking are very, very high. This is why I always cover mine in thermoplastic. But if that's out of your budget, you could cover it in EVA foam. You could just make an EVA foam template, much like Kamui Cosplay is currently doing, and a lot of people are doing that now. You could cover it in paper mache. Yeah, whichever fits your budget. This is just one of many, many ways that you can do it. And if you are putting scales or so forth over the top, you could even just use scraps of thermoplastic. It won't have to be neat under there. Be super, super duper careful if you're covering these with thermoplastic and you need to keep reheating it. Do not keep the heat blasting on it too long, and do not put the heat directly on the hobby foam, because it will just disappear and you will have massive holes in there, which it's not going to be fun. So just take it easy, heat it up bit by bit, carefully on the thermoplastic only. Edge off, blast it with a little bit of heat carefully, and just mush those edges together to get them as flat as you can. Now I always have my thermoplastic on the bottom of the horns, as well as I use contact cement glue to actually attach them to the base of whether it's a crown, the shoulders and so forth. So I do that purely so the glue doesn't eat through the foam. So here are the little horns that are at the front of the crown. I've used Cosplay Flex for these ones, not Warbler. I just wanted to see what it was like to use. These ones took quite a bit of time because there's so many details that I have carved out with them. So I just use little tools to help squidge in the details there. The heat will make some of them visible, so you're not having to go totally blind. But yeah, to get those details in nice and deep as you want them, then you will need tools. I'm pretty sure this is just like a clay work tool that I got in a pack really cheap from like a Ned's or a discount shop. But you could go to your local art store, hardware store probably, craft store. You can probably see like a flat bit at the bottom of the base of that horn. That's actually where it's going to attach to the crown. So I haven't carved any details in there. That will just be glued straight down. So this is the base of the crown. Again, it was another video that I unfortunately lost in the transition to the computer, but as you can see here, I'm actually not gluing them. I'm just using heat to stick it to the warbler of the crown. So Cosplay Flex Warbler, it's all thermoplastic, heat it up, it's going to stick to each other. You do not need glue. So that was a template that I had drawn freehand for the crowns and for the horns. That's the life of making horns and adding scales to them. So this is the base of the shoulders. I just freehanded the pattern. Always err on the side of caution and make them a bit bigger than you think you will, because as soon as you glue them together and fold them, they can actually shrink quite drastically in size, and you can cut things to be smaller, which is much easier than having to add more foam because you've underestimated the size and you've made them way too small. So there's 2 halves to each shoulder. So these 2 pieces that you can see in the foam here, along that long edge on the top is where I'll glue them together. And again, a sharp blade is what you'll need. So that's just a rough idea of how it looked. This is before I'd glue them together. Here's some scales. Those scales are made out of foam clay. By this time I'm pretty sure I was crunching, so that's why there's some pictures and not quite as much video, so I do apologise. Hopefully one day I will not be crunching in the lead up to a convention. So for the decorative details here, it's just strips of EVA foam. Here I'm gluing together a bracer or a gauntlet, whatever you'd rather call them. So here is the life of back to carving out all of those little scales with the wood carving tool. I choose to draw the scales on initially purely because I just find it easier. It does take quite a bit longer because you're drawing and then you're carving. If you feel confident, you can totally freehand this without drawing it prior. So again, you will need ventilation and PPE. I had a fan blasting all the smoke out of an open window there, and I was wearing a mask. So this is the calf piece, so the back of the leg. Try and make scales look a little bit randomized for a costume like this if you can. Obviously for some things they all need to be the same, but for this one I wanted to look a little bit randomized. And this is the bracer. Again, don't press too heavy on this because you could potentially go all the way through the foam and then you're going to breach the integrity of your bracer, which you don't want. So I reckon the foam I was using for the base pieces was probably about 6mm thick, and I probably carved in the depth of maybe about 1mm or so. Any more than that, you're going to reduce the integrity of your pieces. I'm also not carving through where you can see I've hand drawn the details because I'll be gluing pieces on there and using foam clay and so forth. I didn't want too many lines between there. I wanted it to have a solid base to attach to. So once I'd glued all my Dremelled details on, which you saw earlier on in the video, I just heat formed the foam, got it quite soft, and I just wrapped it around my leg. And when it cooled down, it kept the shape relatively well. The great thing about this is it also heat seals the foam, so when you come to priming it, you've already started that journey by heat sealing it. And it also helps the details that have been carved out pop a little bit more, and it tends to clean up the Dremel details a little bit too. this is the calf piece again. Once I take them off, I do tend to roll up the edges quite tight. So that was before everything was heat shaped. And this is after. And here I'm gluing the top and bottom thigh pieces together. Again, I use the contact cement glue for that. And that is attaching a calf piece to the other leg piece. So here is just how I made the boot armor. I unfortunately did sacrifice these boots. Again, these are really cheap boots from I think Kmart or something, or like a secondhand store. But you could totally make like a boot cover or a boot sock to attach your armor to if you don't want to be sacrificing any of your shoes. That's all the templates and the boot base pieces. So for the gems, I hand sculpted all of them with epoxy clay. It's a 2-part clay which you use like a clay and it dries hard like a resin. It's super smooth, perhaps not on my sculpting in that particular one, but it's nice and smooth. You can smooth it out really well, and I find that when it comes to creating the mold, you have a nice smooth mold, where I find that normal clay is a bit rougher and you don't tend to get that smoothness that you really want for gems. And with this stuff, you sort of have probably an hour or two work time. The nearer you get to the end of that work time, the harder it is to work with. It loses its stickiness, it starts to dry out. So I'd recommend doing it in bits and using as much as you can in probably the first hour. If you are 3D printer and modeling savvy, you could probably just sculpt some in a 3D software and 3D print them and then cast those. And here I have made my silicone molds already. I just use Pinky Sil. It's a 2-part silicone mold with a really fast cure time. It's really easy to use. I get mine from Adelaide Molding and Casting, but if you just Google it, there should be plenty of places to be able to source it online. And I'm using a clear crystal resin here, which is, I think it's a 2-to-1 part resin. I'm mixing it here and you can see that it's gone from like a murky colour to a much clearer colour. That's sort of a good gauge as to when it's ready. With this stuff, it does say it's got a curing time of about a day. I found it took much longer than that, even in really warm, dry weather. And just make sure you mix it totally right, because if you don't, it doesn't cure very well. So here I've just whacked in my LEDs behind the gems. I painted the back of my gems with nail polish. Here I'm gluing these ones on because these ones do not have LEDs behind them. And then I'm just using a top coat nail polish over the top of those. And here I put foam clay details around. Again, I apologize for the photos. I was crunching hard by this time. I lost footage. I didn't have time to video, so I am so sorry. Hopefully you still get the rough idea. But here's a clear nail polish. As you can see, it takes away that cloudiness of the gems. Here I made a skirt. I used 2 layers of fabric for that. I just added a skirt purely for my own modesty. Claws were made out of warbler and foam. That is a rough black base coat with a orange red over top. It took a long time to get the red right, so just trial and error. There's gold on there. That's the costume all together. So again, I'm so sorry for the lack of footage at the end, but I hope it was still helpful for you guys. Hey guys, that was the Alex Strasser time-lapse video. Yeah, I do apologize that I kind of wasn't able to record quite as much as I wanted to, but I hope it helped you guys anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like it and want to stay updated, feel free to subscribe. Totally cool if not. I'm not gonna hate anyone if they don't. Thank you again so much for watching, guys, and see you in the next video. Bye!